Hi there! Thank you so much for tuning in to the Purple Pixie. My name is Crystal, and I want to welcome you to the Fairy Garden, aka my craft room. You'll see all kinds of things here, like DIYs and tutorials, home decor, trash to treasure, dupes, flips, makeovers, organizing, stash busting, tips, tricks, hacks, and even a recipe now and then. I also make my own craft supplies. Why? Because I'm on a budget that is so tight, even the piggy squeals when I reach for them. But let's face it, when was the last time you saw a pixie fairy with a job? Well, other than maybe a fairy godmother. But heck, with this economy, even that doesn't pay what it used to. But I always manage. And sometimes I make a little magic, but I also make some mishaps too. Either way, I always invite you to tell me what you think. So now, let me wave my wand and let's attempt some of that magic, shall we? Today, we'll be making Easter eggs and bunnies. Now you may find it hard to believe, but this is the only Easter decor I had. So naturally I had to rectify that situation since I'm a crafter and all. And boy, did I have a lot of projects to make. So let's just jump right into them, shall we? Let's start with project number 1, our decoupage foam core board eggs. For starters, I printed out these shapes that I could trace onto my foam core board. But since I hate cutting things out, I figured I'd just use a little pixie magic and get it done quicker. There, that wasn't so bad. I wish I could get that trick to work on cutting out the foam board, but since I can't, I'm just gonna have to trace them out and cut them out with my X-Acto knife. By the way, I have a lot of projects packed into this video, so I had to speed everything up. If you get dizzy, it's totally my fault. And also, you're welcome. Now, you may know by now if you've seen my recent videos that me and sharp items don't get along so well. So when I'm cutting out a curved object on foam core board, I prefer to lift it off of my work surface by about an inch or two, and then use a sawing motion with my X-Acto knife. You could lay down a self-healing mat and cut it out like that, but I find this technique is much easier. Once all the eggs are cut out, I'm going to give them a nice coat with this ivory acrylic paint. And since these eggs are going to be reversible, I'm going to paint both sides and the edges too. One of my favorite things to decoupage with is gift wrapping tissue paper. Did you know that you can run it through your printer? To do this, I just add a couple pieces of double-sided tape to a regular piece of copy paper. Now usually I would put my copy paper to the edge of the tissue paper, but it had some wrinkles in it and I was too lazy to go get the iron. So I just put it in the middle, cut it out as best I could. Then I simply went into my Silhouette Studio, searched in my library for lace borders, and printed them up. Just be very gentle when you're peeling the tissue paper off the double-sided tape, but I think that goes without saying. But then all I had to do after that was cut out my designs. Once I figured out where I wanted my designs to go, it just took a very thin layer of Mod Podge to cover the egg. I placed them down as flat as I could, and then put another thin layer of Mod Podge over the top. Don't be afraid to let some hang off the edges. That just makes it look a little bit more natural. By the way, if you've seen my other videos, here's a few things you probably already know about me. I love using foam core board in my projects, and I love to decoupage. They're both very versatile. But here's something you probably don't know about me. I hate getting my hands dirty. And decoupage projects well, let's just say they can get a little sticky. But decoupaging with gloves on, it's a little hard. Since life is hard enough, I just decided to get my hands dirty instead. Now I've already painted this egg blue, and I'm going to cover it with this scrap lace. I'm not sure why I traced it out with a Sharpie, because I end up trimming off the edges anyway. But I did, so there's that. Now, when applying lace or fabric, unlike using tissue paper, I want to start off with a good thick layer of Mod Podge on the bottom, and then a good thick layer of Mod Podge on the top too. Anytime you decoupage, it's a good rule of thumb to start from the middle and work your way out to the sides. This ensures that your paper will stay put, and it can also reduce the amount of wrinkles. I wonder if I decoupage my face if I could cut down on the wrinkles there too. 'Cause all these lady creams that I've been trying, well, they're pretty much just as useless as a Louisiana politician. In other words, they ain't working for me. Here's another good rule of thumb. Whenever you're trimming the edges, hold your scissors at an angle and trim as close to the edge as you can. Now we're going to be putting some more lace on another egg. And remember, go pretty thick with the Mod Podge, because it is a fabric. And speaking of fabric, while that egg's set aside to dry, we're going to be putting fabric on the other side of our large egg. I've had this Easter fabric for quite a few years, so it's about time I use it for something. So we're going to start with a generous layer of Mod Podge again, press our egg down onto the fabric, and of course, put a good thick coat on top. Trim it up a little and set it aside to dry. Here you can see how most of them have turned out, but I still need to trim the edges on a couple of them. It's much easier to trim the edges once the fabric and the glue have dried. The fabric's a little stiffer, so you have a little more control over what you trim off. This egg was covered in lace, but I painted it after it had dried, much like I'm doing to this one in purple. I just go in with a paintbrush and then dab it off with a paper towel. I wasn't quite getting as much off as I wanted to, so I put a little water on it with some paintbrush and dabbed off some more. It kind of gives it an ombre effect. Man, all these eggs can sure make a poor girl hungry. Are you ready to make a bunny? 'Cause I know I am. Remember when I traced all those eggs out on the foam core? Well, I traced the bunny out too. I'm just showing you this part because it might help you if you don't know how to cut curves out of foam core. I use the same method, which is lifting the piece up a few inches off of the work surface, and then using a sawing motion, I gently and carefully go around the curves. However, sometimes my blade gets stuck, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. As you'll see here in a second, my blade got stuck right at the nose of the bunny. Rather than continuing in the same direction, I start from the opposite side until I reach the spot where the blade was stuck. That gives me a nice clean cut line and less edges that I have to trim up later. Now that I have my hair cut, I'm going to give him a nice coat of brown on both sides. I'm going to be decoupaging him with some white tissue paper, but we're going to crumple it up and give him some texture. In this case, we want as many wrinkles as possible. It's going to give him more of a hairy look. Did you catch that one? Hairy? Hair? I kill myself sometimes. And I'm sure my jokes kill you sometimes too. Anyway, back to the wabbit. I crumpled up the tissue paper before I put it down, and instead of trying to smooth out the wrinkles, I just pounced some Mod Podge on top. And now with more Mod Podge on my brush, I'm going to go around the edge of the foam core board to kind of tear the tissue paper off, but it's also going to help hide that rough edge of the foam core board. Once both sides are covered and he's all dry, I'm going to go in with some burnt umber paint and kind of dry brush them, but also, as you can see, blotting off some more paint with a napkin. The combination of blotting and dry brushing makes the paint darker in some areas and therefore a little more realistic looking. And then I give him a good distressing with some ivory paint and he's all done. Now let's move on to project number 3, the decoupage eggs with napkins. Now folks, I don't get to go out shopping very often, but last week I was able to go to the Dollar Tree. And while I was there, I picked up these really pretty napkins that I just couldn't wait to get home and start cutting up. I also got some more plastic Easter eggs, but you'll be seeing more of those in a moment. For right now, I'm going to start cutting up these designs on these napkins to put them on my foam core eggs. I'm going to trim away as much of the negative space or white area of the napkin that I can, because I'm not sure which ones of these I'm going to put on my plastic eggs, and that part will show against the colored background. I cut out some flowers and then some of these beautiful butterflies as well. I just hope, as thin as these butterfly napkins are, I don't have any flyaways. Now, most people will tell you, when decoupaging with napkins, you have to peel the 2 layers apart. But I'm here to tell you, you don't necessarily have to do that. Napkins are usually so thin that if you get a good layer of glue on there, they won't peel apart. The glue is going to soak right through the napkin. So if you should forget to peel your napkin layers, you shouldn't have anything to worry about. By the way, here's another little trick. I lay my stuff on K-cup pods to dry. That way, they don't get stuck to the table. And now we're getting into the plastic eggs. I'm going to take this little nail file and I'm going to sand off the hinge on the plastic egg. We don't want any bumpy parts sticking out of our decoupage. And then I'm going to cover about half of it with some glue. Pick up the napkin with my paintbrush and lay it on my egg. This butterfly went on beautifully. And again, I'm setting it in a cured cup pod to dry. Just make sure you turn them every now and then so they don't stick to the cup. And now I'm putting a larger design on my egg. To get it to wrap around the curves, I cut little slits in it here and there, and then just glue it down on top of itself. This may work for some designs like this one, but not all, so really it's just a judgment call. If this is your first time visiting my channel, I'd like to again say welcome and thank you for coming. I hope you like what you see, and if you do, I hope you'll consider subscribing and becoming a part of the Pixie Party. My style can simply be described as eclectic, which means I like a little bit of everything. I mean, sure, I like farmhouse, who doesn't these days? But I also like everything else, like shabby chic, glam, industrial, boho, rustic, and basically anything else that pops into my head. And I do it all on the cheap. I'm quite proud of the fact that I'm so frugal, especially since that means that you too will be able to make most of these projects with items that you already have on hand. My goal is to inspire you to think outside the box and get your creative juices flowing. Sure, imitation is the best form of flattery, but to inspire others really gets you right in the feels. Know what I mean? Now, if you're returning and are already a part of the Pixie Party, I'd like to tell you welcome back and thank you very much for all of your support. I consider my subscribers my friends, and I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. You inspire me and encourage me in so many ways that I just can't thank you enough. Now, as I mentioned, I did make a run to the Dollar Tree, and that's where I got these plastic eggs. But can somebody please tell me what the heck kind of language this is? Or at least let me know what that funky letter is. I've seen a lot of stuff in my lifetime, but I've never seen that. I want to show you this easy drying rack that I made. I just drilled some holes into a small board that my skewers would fit into. I think it was a 3/8 inch drill bit. And now all I have to do is poke my skewers into my project, put them in my board, and let them alone to dry. With that being said, now it's time to paint. I ended up giving each of these eggs 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. And now we're going to make some hangers for the eggs so they can hang on my Easter tree. I cut some ribbons in different colors to about 7 inches in length. My original plan was to string the ribbon through these floret-shaped beads, but as you can see, the openings on them are pretty small. So, what would a purple pixie video be without a few fails? And here goes number 1. Realizing that the ribbon would not string through the bead itself, I tried my mini screwdriver to poke it through the hole. But the mini screwdriver proved to be too big. So the next thing on my list was a paper clip. I figured if the paper clip would fit through the hole, then surely it would push the ribbon through there. But, as usual, I was wrong. It just kept poking a hole in the ribbon. So, there was fail number 2. But, you should also know that I've never let failure stop me. I just figured out another way to do it. I tied a slip knot at the end, trimmed it off, and then simply hot glued it to the bead. But wait a minute, before I go gluing things down, better put my finger protectors on. And lastly, I just glued the bead right to the top of my egg. Now, I didn't hang all of them like this. In fact, I'm going to show you a few different ways to do it. On this foam core egg, I just poked a hole right in the middle with that mini screwdriver, put a little dab of hot glue, and then use the screwdriver again to poke the ribbon into the hole. And for this plastic egg, I simply took the screwdriver again, made the hole in the top a little bigger, then put a little hot glue and my ribbon. I made sure it was in there real good with that screwdriver, and then I repeated it again with the other end of the ribbon. And now it's time for the large egg, which is going to be our tree topper. I just stuck a skewer right in the middle, secured it with some hot glue, and then to make it stay on the tree, I'm going to put a clothespin right there on the skewer. These are all done, so we're moving on to project number 4, a chicken and egg, aka Lieutenant Dan. It starts out with one of the larger of the Easter eggs that I bought, and I just took some nail clippers and trimmed it around the edges to make it look a little jagged like a broken eggshell. I cut both the bottom and the top, gave it a couple of coats of my Waverly chalk paint, and then using the skewers put them on my drying rack. I made sure to paint the inside of the egg as well because I wasn't sure if that would be seen or not. And now I'd like to introduce you to Lieutenant Dan. Yep, that's what I named this little chick, and you'll see why in a minute. He's pretty cute, don't you think? And considering what was about to happen, I figured I'd let him hop around a little bit and get it out of his system. Now that the eggshell is dried, I'm gonna put Lieutenant Dan in there and make it look like he's just been hatched. But oh no! Lieutenant Dan doesn't fit in the eggshell. So I let him have one last little hop for good measure. And then... I'm so sorry, little Lieutenant Dan, but I'm just gonna have to, well, pop your legs right off. Folks, I promise, he didn't feel a thing. Me, on the other hand, I struggled to get that little wind-up part off. Stay tuned to the blooper reel at the end and you'll see what I mean. But for now, let's finish putting little Lieutenant Dan in his little eggshell. Well, after I cut off what's left of his legs, that is. Have you figured out yet why I named him Lieutenant Dan? Well, if you haven't, you need to go watch Forrest Gump. And not just to get the Lieutenant Dan reference, it's just actually a really good movie. So anyway, I put him back into his little eggshell, put his little cap on, and then I wasn't sure if I wanted to hang him from the tree or set him on the table. So I put a hanger on him anyway, just in case. And then I got a really bright idea, which doesn't happen to me often, so I was quite proud. Yep, I gave Lieutenant Dan his legs back. He turned out to be the cutest little thing. I mean, look at him. Isn't he just adorable? And now for project number 5, Shabby Chic eggs. I started out putting the hangers through the tops of these eggs because I knew I was going to have to plug up the other holes with some spackle. But this time, since we're going for a shabby chic look, I'm using jute twine instead of ribbon. But I did just tie a slip knot in the end, just like I did with the ribbon. Now I'm taking that mini screwdriver again, and I'm going to poke the twine through one of the holes in the top of the egg. Once the twine is pulled through on the other side, I'm going to take this fabric tape and put a few strips over the other holes. That way the spackle will have something to adhere to rather than just going straight into the egg. Then with my finger, I just put a little bit of that lightweight spackle from the Dollar Tree into each of the holes. And then I give each egg 2 coats of my Waverly plaster chalk paint. When they were dry, I did embellish them with some burlap and bows, but I kind of forgot to hit record, so you'll just have to wait till the end reveal to see what they look like. And since we were talking about spackle, let's move on to the spackled eggs. I kind of want to call these my Bob Ross eggs. Not because I'm going to paint them, but because they truly were a happy accident. You see, when I went to put the spackle in the holes on these eggs, I didn't put any tape on the inside, so the spackle just kept falling into the hole. I decided then to just go ahead and give the whole thing a layer of spackle, and I'm so glad I did. It really gave them a shabby chic look all their own. But you see, I still had trouble covering those holes. But I just kept smearing and smudging, and everything came out fine. Once the spackle was almost completely dry, I decided they were just a little too rough. So, as if I hadn't made a big enough mess already, I took my fingernail file and I gently went around all of the eggs just to smooth them out a bit. And now we're going to give these eggs a makeover. Well, not really a makeover, but we are going to use a makeup sponge. I chose some really pretty soft pastel colors to paint them, and I just dipped the sponge into a little bit of paint and lightly brushed it onto the eggs, just enough so that the texture would pick up the color. I was basically dry brushing, but with a makeup sponge instead of a paintbrush. And I can't tell you how pleased I was with how they turned out. Stay tuned to see them in the final reveal, which, by the way, we're almost there. If you're still with me, thanks so much for hanging in there. I promise the end result will be worth it. But now it's time to work on a real makeover. A decoupage bunny, or zombie bunny makeover. You may recall seeing this little guy in the pic at the beginning of the video. I've had him for a couple of years, but this is what he looked like before. Look at that. Red eyes, blue fur. I mean, what kind of bunny is that? He desperately needed a makeover. So, I tried last year to just paint his eyes blue, but that doesn't seem to help him much. I can understand that he was once a piggy bank and was probably meant to go into a baby's nursery or something. But who in the hell would put this in their baby's nursery? I mean, doesn't that creep you out? I know it creeps me out. So Zombie Bunny here is gonna get a good makeover. I started by ripping off all the old, fur, I guess you would call it. And this thing was so old, it literally peeled off with one hand. But I actually welcomed that because it made my job a whole lot easier. Now, I have to give credit where credit is due. I saw Corey over at Crafted by Corey decoupage a little bunny rabbit. And just like everything Corey makes, it turned out beautiful. If you've never seen her channel, I highly suggest you go check it out. I'll leave a link in the description box below. Now, Corey used some of those beautiful flower napkins that we used earlier. But when I got my hands on this zombie bunny, I didn't have any of those napkins at the time. So, I went to my old faithful and printed up something on tissue paper. And since I knew I was going to be using tissue paper, and it would be see-through, I had to give Zombie Bunny a good coat of paint, cover up the coin slot, and another good coat of paint before I could move on to decoupaging him with my plaid printed out tissue paper. Of course, that was another time that I forgot to hit record, but I'm pretty sure if you've made it this far into the video, you know how to decoupage already. Now look at him. It turned out pretty cute, huh? But he's still missing something. And even though he's an Easter bunny, I still didn't want him to be quite so holy. So I traced him out on some felt and cut out a bottom for him. By the way, did you know that alcohol will clean Sharpie off of almost anything? It's true, even skin. So if your Rugrats ever have a Sharpie party, just slather them down with some good old alcohol and it'll wash right off. So now that Zombie Bunny has a new butt and a new bottom, all he's missing is a bow. So, once again, I take my good stash of ribbon and I'm just going to make a quick little messy bow. I measure out the lengths that I need, cut a few strips of each ribbon, and just stack them on top of each other. Then I take a small piece of jute twine and tie it around the middle, as tight as I can. Now I'm just going to take some more jute twine and make a small finger bow to go in the middle of the messy bow. I just wrap the twine around my finger a few times, cut off another piece of jute twine to tie around the middle. Once it's tied tight, fluff it out a little bit. Now I'm just trimming down the messy bow so it's not so big on our new bunny. Once that's done, I'm going to hot glue it down, hot glue the finger bow in the middle of that, and he'll be all done. And just like that, our boy Zombie Bunny is now a girl Easter Bunny. I think I'm going to name her Caitlyn Jenner, because she hasn't been a girl very long and she already needs some cosmetic surgery on her bottom. And speaking of bunny bottoms, let's get into project number 7, the yarn bunny butt. I've been wanting to make one of these bunny butts that looks like it's popping out of something or digging in the garden, but I just didn't know where to put it. Well, now that I'm going to have an Easter tree, I've got the perfect place. So I took a small dinner plate and I traced it out on the foam core board. I traced out one to be the actual bunny butt, and the second one is a size reference so that I could freehand the bunny feet. And you've already seen my method of cutting curved shapes out of foam core board, so I won't make you watch that again. Now my little bunny's feet need some little bunny toes. So I take my scissors and cut 2 crescent-shaped incisions into the foot. Then I turn it over and I cut the crescent shapes out on the other side. Now it's time to make Fuzzy Wuzzy a little fuzzy. So I'm going to take this really soft yarn that I had and we're going to wrap it around the entire bunny butt. Get out your finger protectors because we're going to be using hot glue for this. I start out by hot gluing the yarn to right smack dab in the middle of the bunny's butt. From there, it's as simple as laying down another bead of hot glue and coiling the yarn around and around until you've covered the entire surface. Once you've covered the whole surface, make sure you go around the edge with the yarn as well. And since I'm pretty sure you get the gist of it, let's just move on to the feet. The feet are pretty much the same routine as the bunny butt, but instead of going in a circle, you're going to wrap the yarn in an oblong pattern. And of course, I forgot to put my finger protector on first, but that's okay. No foul here, because we're working on bunnies, not chickens. Once you have the upper part of the foot wrapped, it's time to move on to the toes. I apologize that it's so blurry, but I was trying to get a close-up so that you would see how to wrap the toes, and unfortunately, my camera doesn't focus that great. Come to think of it, neither do I. But basically, you just wrap the yarn in each individual toe. Trim off the excess ends, and then go around the edge of the foam core board with the yarn, just like you did the bunny butt. Now just glue the bunny's feet to the bottom half of his butt, and you're all done, right? Wrong. You gotta make this bunny a tail, so we're gonna use the same yarn and make a pom-pom. Now I know that making a pom-pom can be a little intimidating. Some people use a piece of cardboard to wrap it around, but I just use my fingers. I wrapped this one several times, and then instead of taking the scrap piece of yarn and feeding it through the loops, I just tie it around the center as though I'm making a bow. Tie it as tight as you possibly can, and then take your scissors and snip through all the loops, cutting them loose. And now it gets really fun, but it also gets really messy. Now you have to trim the pom-pom. I take it as tight as I can in my hand and trim as close as I can to my fingers. Then flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Fluff it out and give it even more of a trim. This is going to sound redundant, but the more you trim off, the fuller the pom-pom becomes. Just keep fluffing and trimming and fluffing and trimming, and basically just play with it until it's the right size and consistency that you want. But before you go thinking that we're all done again, you're wrong. We've got to give this bunny some pads on his feet. So I take the pastel pink paint, and I'm just going to paint on top of the yarn to give his little bunny feet some definition. Now, you could put a hanger on this, but I want to clip them to one of the tree branches. So I'm just going to glue the top half of a clothespin onto the back of the bunny. And now that he's all finished, let's move on to our last project, the big, messy bow. As I mentioned earlier, I have a big stash of ribbon. In fact, I have a whole cabinet full of ribbon. I also had this Easter cellophane wrap to wrap Easter baskets with, but I never used it. But I was bound and determined that I was going to use it some way, somehow this year. And this was the perfect project for it. So I start by cutting a few strips, and then I was going to cut them into 3 equal parts, but it didn't quite turn out that way. But since I was making a staggered bow anyhow, I figured I'd just roll with it. So I took the 3 different lengths and I measured out the ribbons to twice the length of the cellophane. I just went about it randomly. Some I made into both medium and large, some I made into large and small, and some I made into small and medium. Once they were all cut, I took some hot glue and glued the ends of each strip of ribbon together so that each strip formed a loop. And now that all my loops and layers were done, all I had to do was stack them on top of each other, cinch them together, and tie them with this ribbon that I'm slipping underneath it. If you're still with me, don't duck out now. The big final reveal's coming right up. After I got this all tied together and fluffed out a bit, I did go back with another piece of ribbon to make the center look more finished. And voila! A beautiful big Easter bow to put on the top of my tree. And if you've hung in there this long with me, you deserve this. The final reveal. So there you have it. Can you believe I went from just this to all this? I think I did pretty good. But what do you think? Were my projects magic or mishaps? Let me know in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Come on, become a part of the Pixie Party. And don't forget to ring my bell. That way you'll know every time I upload a new video. Go ahead and give me a big thumbs up if you liked what you saw. And if you didn't, give me a big thumbs down. And hey, if this video went too fast for you or you have any questions, you can always reach me at the social media links down below. Now with all that being said, I'll leave you with this. When in need, work with what you have and make what you have work. Thanks again for watching, and always remember that all of me loves all of you.